car right here, and it has some issues. So what I'm gonna do is show you the issue. So the other day I went to move it because I was cleaning the garage, and I went to go start it, and it does this. Oh. And it does this. Normal, but then it did this. Except there was more of a starter click. Now listen when I push the button. You can hear it turning my fans on. So when I push the starter button, it turns the fan on. Now watch this. When I push my brakes, it turns the fan on. When I push my brakes, it lights up the gauge. Interesting. And then I started just pulling stuff apart to see what could possibly be causing it, just kind of going backwards, because last thing I worked on was the boost controller wiring, and then on accident I took the positive, that this wire comes right over to the positive on the alternator, and watch this. Touching the positive to my throttle cable, and I touched it there on accident when I was moving stuff around. When I touch the positive to my throttle cable, turns the fans on. So I'm kind of scratching my head on this one. We're gonna go on an adventure, and I'm just gonna start kind of going back through, unplugging things. I did take apart, like unplugged the ECU, unplugged all the relays, unplugged all the fuses, still doing it. So I'm thinking what's happening is there's something that got switched up somewhere. I'm guessing maybe, I don't know. It happened when I tried to start it and the starter clicked, and then it like got stuck on the flywheel. I did end up having to turn the crank to loosen it up, and then it was doing it after that. So it might be a starter issue, which is really weird. But it's like when I ground my brake with the brake switch, it's sending power back to the fans. Very strange. But it's also concerning a little bit that when I apply power to my throttle cable, it turns the fans on. I'm confused. Okay, so I did something. And when I push the brake pedal, I don't get the fans turning on. So all I did was run a jumper with the jumper cable over to the ground on the battery and then up to the engine. So now when I take that off, when I push it, you hear the fans turn on and that light turns on. So we'll go back over, put the jumper on. This is really strange, guys. And I have a 0 gauge welding wire going down to the frame that's welded onto the car. And then I have this guy going all the way up to the front, another 0 gauge welding all the way up to the front. And right here, and then this guy comes up to the block right under the starter. This guy goes engine block to the car. So very, very strange. I wonder if that thing is just loose down there. Oh, it's tight. So very odd, very odd. But now when I put that wire back on there, you can see it doesn't turn the fans on or the light on. And then when I go to start it again, you'll hear the starter click. But it doesn't actually start the car. It just clicks and kind of stops. But now I go back to pushing this, runs the fans. And then when I push this now, it runs the fans and turns the gauge on. So my thought is that there's something up with the starter. So I'm gonna pull this off, disconnect it, and then reconnect it. I also have to, once you hear it lock like that, I have to spin the crankshaft to get the little thing to release. So it was also strange before I touched the cable here again, and then it clicked the starter. So there it just runs the fans. So now I set it back up so it doesn't turn the fans on. But then now, see if it does it again. And I went over here to touch this wire to the throttle cable again. Ooh. Well, now it worked that time like it was supposed to. Yeah, last time I did that, it actually clicked the starter. So that was interesting. So I'm thinking it's something with the starter. That was odd. Now it's back to normal. Okay. So that one, when I connected it there that time, previously when I did it off camera, like I said, I touched it there and it clicked the starter. So it was like it was sending power through here to the starter solenoid to activate that. Now this time when I touched it there, it sparked like it should, like normal. Because you're basically grounding the positive. And then after I did that and grounded it, then it actually sent power to the starter with the button. Interesting. All right, so now we have a completely different situation. So we have 12.4 on the battery. I do have the extra ground hooked up to the engine block up front. So now I'm going to go push on the brake again, and we'll see what happens. It's different than what it's doing last time. Now it's not going to do it. Okay, so I'm going to go try to start it and see what happens. I'll hit the starter. So now I hit the starter and it drops down to 0.7 volts. That is crazy. So now I turn ignition off. And it'll rise back to about 12.4. So now I'm going to hit the brake. So now my foot is still off the brake. I'm back behind the car and it's hanging out at 2 volts. So I think when that starter is like locked out in the position, out position, like the gear's locked out, it's like always pulling current through the starter or something. That has to be what it is. So now I flip the switch back on and off, and then it'll go back. But then when I hit the brake switch again, it goes back to 2.8. So switch on and off again, back to 11.5. So now I'm going to spin the engine over so it releases the starter and then see what it does. Alright, so now that starter gear is not locked in position. I'm going to hit the brake again. And it's still doing it. Man. This is weird, very weird. So I think what I'm going to do now is pull the starter off and then I'll go through that same sequence again and see if it still does it. All right, so I got a little bit more done. I don't know if that's really the right word, but I did some more stuff. I unplugged all of the engine harness, everything, map sensor, crank sensor, everything on the engine. I've been going through one by one and unplugging everything and unhooking things. So I did find that when I have, so this is at 12 volts now, when I have my fan in the back unplugged, one of the wires unplugged, so now it dropped to 11.6. So when I turn my ignition switch on, when I have that fan unplugged, it drops right down. So it's like 65 millivolts right now. So, oh, I'm tripping. So if I plug this thing back in, so when I plug the thing back in, you hear the fan's making noise and starting to spin now. And then it goes back to 11.3. So well, it was dropping before because that voltage, or that fan was unplugged. That's why it was dropping voltage. So now when I do this, it turns the fans back on. Before, when I would push this and it would get stuck at 2 volts because that fan was unplugged. So it's almost like it's trying to pass power through that fan. And when I push the pedal, it runs the fan and then it bleeds off the power. So I've gone through and unplugged pretty much everything that I could. I did all these individually: ignition, starter, and fan relay. And you can hear the fan. I don't know if you can hear it on the camera, but it's making that buzzing noise. So ECU unplugged. The only thing I can do to get it to change is unplug this relay here. Let's try to do it on camera. I don't know if you can hear the buzzing. Now the buzzing stops. You hear the relay activate and it starts buzzing again. That buzzing is sending power to the fan. So this is not a fan relay. And then even if I unplug my fan relay and my starter relay, when I unplug my ignition relay, it shuts off too. But that's probably killing, because it's killing power to everything. So whatever's wrong, we're going to find out, because I'm going to pull it all out. So the computer's going to come out, the wiring is going to come out, the trans is going to come out, engine might come out. We're going to do some stuff differently, and that's what starts now. But I really just wanted to figure that out, so I'm probably going to start by unlooming everything, and that'll be kind of boring. So let's get to some other stuff. Forgot to add, I did take the starter out and tested the starter. Starter worked fine out here. And the symptoms were the same with the starter in and out, so it didn't really change anything.